about 2 minutes. Please settle in, find your seat. We're going to get started in about 2 minutes. Then lapel is right here too. So you can do Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Everyone's tired from driving in the rain, huh? Thank you so much for being here with us tonight. We're very, very excited to gather on this momentous occasion. MashaAllah, many of you know Imam Azeez wrote a book, The Imam and the Atheist. I'm seeing a lot of folks with copies of it in the crowd. So tonight, inshallah, we are going to have a community conversation. You'll hear from a few different speakers who are deeply involved in the process in a multitude of ways. You'll also hear, obviously, from Imam himself. We'll have a session of question and answer, and then Imam will be available at this table right here. He'll be signing books for everybody, and we have some light appetizers and tea to follow. So inshallah, without further ado, as some of you may know, the RIA Institute provides solutions to modern day challenges. And something that we're addressing today is atheism, which is a modern day challenge. So inshallah, as we move through the program, you'll kind of hear some of the content, and if you've read the book, you're probably familiar with it. So let's get started with Sister Zainab Azeez. Sister Zainab Azeez is a student working towards med school. She's also Imam Azeez's daughter, but that comes secondary to her being a student.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for joining us today. Oh, there's a lot of people. Okay. Okay, so being the Imam's daughter, I grew up in a pretty religious household where Deen was incorporated in almost every aspect of my life. My dad would never teach us to do things just because it was asked of us. He would teach us the significance of the things that we would do. We understood the significance of wudu, of prayer, of living your life in accordance to Islam. It was explained to me that the word deen means a way of life. That being said, being a Muslim woman in the West, going to middle school and high school here, no matter how much of a foundation and pillars and support system that you may have, as I mentioned from my own personal experience and my household growing up, anyone can struggle with their faith and have doubts in their faith. I remember being a freshman in high school, and I surrounded myself with people that were not good for my deen, a few of which were atheists. Being an impressionable young woman at the time, after just a few conversations with them, over time I realized that my faith in God and in Islam had been chipped away. Their arguments for why God didn't exist at the time made so much sense to me, until slowly every conversation took a part of me away. I remember one of those days I had this overwhelming feeling that I was missing something. I felt it in my chest and I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was, but I felt a void in my life. I remember sitting one day at the dinner table with my family, and I hadn't really planned on bringing it up. But I looked at my dad and I said, I'm struggling with my faith and I'm struggling in my belief in God. And I immediately realized the weight of what I said. He stopped for a minute and he looked at me. I know it took him by surprise, even though he acted like it didn't. He responded in a way that I didn't expect. He did not get angry, he did not get upset. He looked at me and he said, "What are you struggling with?" From then on, almost once a week, over the dinner table, my dad and I would have conversations about the existence of God as a principle. I remember once we cleared the table after dinner, he asked one of us to grab a clean spoon, and he began to show me how time must have a beginning, with a spoon on the dinner table. These conversations with my dad had continued for months. He dealt with this hard situation with patience, love, and understanding. Months went by, and my faith grew stronger and stronger until it was back completely. I went to him after dinner one night, and I hugged him. I told him, "Dad, you should write a book about this. Imagine the amount of people that you can impact, who struggled just like I did." He was a little bit skeptical at first. Writing a book to cover these extensive topics, it would take a lot of work, a lot of research. I think it was about 6 months after that he told me that he had began writing the book. I wanted to share this with you all because my father, being who he is, I struggled with my belief in God. All of us either know someone who is struggling, or we will come across someone who is struggling. And that is the true impact of this book. It will either benefit you or someone you know. You may come across a son, a daughter, a sibling, a friend. You may hear them tell you all these reasons as to why God can't exist, and every single thing was covered for me over the dinner table, and probably for the rest of the people in the book. Our current state in society, I'm confused myself. Our current state of society, there's this push of atheism. And I truly hope that this book can impact you or someone that you know that may be struggling. I'm not sure if I ever said it directly, but Dad, thank you for your patience with me, and thank you for writing this book. And I truly hope that it changes the hearts of many as it did for mine. Thank you.
I don't think there's a dry eye in the crowd when we started off. I don't know how anybody can beat that, Sister Zainab. Thank you so much for that very powerful look into kind of the background of the book and the process as to how it came about. I realized, for those who don't know me, my name is Sister Namera. I feel like I'm on the mic often enough that I don't need to introduce myself anymore, but I serve as the CCO, the Chief Communications Officer at Tarbiyah Institute, and I, as many of us, were deeply involved in some of Imam's projects revolving around this content. So thank you, Sister Zainab. We'll follow up with Imam Kamran. Imam Kamran is the son of Pakistani immigrants, born and raised in the Sacramento Valley, graduated from UC Davis with a bachelor's degree in political science, while also studying Islam under the mentorship of Imam Azeez for well over a decade. His experience includes years of youth work in the local community, and he now serves as the campus Imam of the Zambia Hospital. Welcome, Imam Kamran.
Assalamu alaikum. Brothers and sisters, community members, it's an honor to be here among you today. For those of you who don't know, as Sister Navar mentioned, my name is Kamran, and while I may carry that title here and there, I am really in many ways a product of the elders and the adults that were around me, the mentors around me, who helped to shape who I am. And first and foremost among those mentors is the Imam, the father, the brother and friend that we are here to celebrate his accomplishment today, that is Imam Azeez. My relationship with Imam Azeez goes back quite a ways, actually. And somehow I just made this realization earlier today when I was doing the math. I am 35. That's not the realization. Although sometimes that, you forget at this age. I met Imam Azeez when I was 17, which means that I've known Imam Azeez for more than half my life, which is a pretty awesome accomplishment. It's just one way to share with you how much impact he's had on me personally as a mentor. So I'll have to save myself some embarrassment and not share particular stories of that time, but I'll just say that his impact on me was formative, not just in terms of my knowledge of Islam, but in terms of how I carry myself and my character, and so much of what I do and I'm inspired to do to this day. I share with you a famous statement. Imam Malik, rahimahullah, Sahib al-Muwatta, the author of the Muwatta, the famous and early hadith collection, he used to tell the story of when his mother, may Allah be pleased with her as well, when his mother would prepare him in the morning to help him go and get ready for to spend time at the masjid and to study. And she would get his clothing and things like that, and then she would help him to wrap his amama. And then afterwards, she would tell him something, and he repeated that statement as well. She would tell him, "Idhhab ila Rabi'a." I want you to go and study with Rabi'a. Go to Rabi'a. He was one of the narrators of hadith and the scholars and the mufti of the masjid of the Prophet ﷺ. "Idhhab ila Rabi'a, fata'allam min adabihi qabla din." Go to Rabi'a and you learn from his character before you learn from his knowledge. فَتَعَلَّمْ مِنْ أَدَبِهِ قَبْلَ عِلْمِهِ. Learn from his character before you learn from his knowledge. I've had the privilege of learning from Imam's knowledge, but even more so the privilege of learning from Imam's character. And that character, I stand here today, brothers and sisters, I didn't seek his permission to do this. And that was probably poor adab on my part. But I stand here today to attest to his character, and there's a reason I want to do that. I stand here today to attest to his character that I've seen in action in the time that he spent with students who would week after week, month after month, not do their assignments consistently, pretend like they were, and still he bore with them and worked with them until they caught up, until they figured it out and started taking the matter seriously and learned. I attest to his patience in that regard. I attest to his clarity of vision. When the community, and I think many of you are aware in the past, went through that crisis and that struggle back at Salam. And there were opportunities to cause harm to each other and to speak ill of each other, and I watched as Imam Azeez spoke to others and taught them what it means to take the moral high ground, what it means to act in a prophetic way even when others may fall short of that character. I watched, brothers and sisters, as Imam Azeez, despite the fact that there are hundreds of projects that are going on and so many of them that he's taking on himself, he continues to take counseling cases, he continues to work with community members, continues to give his time, and just literally pick up the phone and call somebody and speak to them for an hour and a half or 2 hours, knowing that he could have spent that time with his family members or with his loved ones or with his friends, and instead gave that to somebody whose name he barely even knows. I can attest to the character of Imam Azeez, who comes here on a daily basis, who spends his time, the best of his day, the most of his hours at this organization, at Tarbiyah Institute, without taking a single dime for himself, without taking any compensation for himself. He makes his income and supports his family elsewhere, but gives the best and the most of his time and his energy to this community effort. I can continue to attest to his character today, brothers and sisters, but I think many of you perhaps are already aware. And the reason that's important, brothers and sisters, is because the battle against atheism it really is a battle. It has become an intellectual battle, and sometimes having had the honor now of being able to join Imam Azeez in that battle and stand on the battlefield with him, and God knows why Allah, He picked me, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose me to stand there as well, and I hope that He will choose some of you to stand there as well. But sometimes you're on the battlefield, and you're watching one particular soldier who looks as though he is operating like 10, and taking on multiple opponents, and overwhelming and overcoming challenges that everyone else is so fearful to even address or look in the eyes. And I feel that today we see that same thing in the form of Imam Azeez, taking on this battle against atheism, saving lives. In fact, saving afterlives, saving the akhirah of so many youth and so many adults working day after day on this mission. And I want to ask you all, I want to request of you all, if you were aware, you are all aware that works like this need to be done. We have to be doing, some people in the community have to be doing something like this, right? And we acknowledge that not everyone can. When we recognize someone who can, isn't it incumbent upon all of us to go out of our way to support that soldier, to support that general when he is leading the cause? So I call upon all of you, brothers and sisters, to do what I've had the honor and the privilege of doing, and to stand next to Imam Azeez on the battlefield so that he can do the work that he's doing in service of not only this community, but of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and bringing back God to the hearts and minds of people around the world. Jazakallah khair, Imam Azeez, for allowing me to be a student of yours, and Jazakallah khair, everybody, for giving me a few minutes of your attention.
Thank you, Imam Kumran. As you've sort of heard from the speakers that have already come up, Imam Azeez's content, the dinner table discussions, the community conversations he's had with folks who are struggling with their faith, it's presented itself in sort of three different ways at Tarbiyah Institute. One is the book that we're celebrating tonight. The other is his God and Philosophy class, which, mashallah, I think some of you have taken. And the third is a video series. So we'll talk about the video series a little bit later in the program, but I'd like to invite Sister Monia, who is a student in the God and Philosophy class for a full year, and she's going to share with us a little bit about her experience in the class.
Assalamu alaikum. As I was coming here today, I had the unfortunate incident of getting caught in the rain. And as it was raining, or before I left home, I actually was like, oh, it's raining. I gotta get my jacket, I gotta get my rain boots, I gotta find my umbrella. And I don't know about you, but 7 months out of the year, I have no idea where my umbrella is. Except for when the 2 months it rains, then I'm like, oh my gosh, umbrella is like my extended arm. Right? Imam Azeez is probably very confused because probably thinks I didn't get the memo for the topic. But just like when a storm is brewing outside, we equipped ourselves properly. Our society is coming against a storm of atheism. And we need to equip ourselves properly. And that's why I wanted to talk about the God and Philosophy class. It is an excellent way of learning about God and how God exists, why God exists. It's a great way to equip yourself against all the rhetoric that's outside in society right now about questions about does God really exist? How can a God be just and merciful? And how can a merciful God let others suffer? Maybe a lot of you guys ask yourself this question, especially with the situation in Palestine right now. Maybe you ask yourself, what is divine will and how does that work with my free will? What about evolution? These are some of the topics that we covered in God and Philosophy class. And in this class, I would say what it taught me was, first and foremost, the basics of philosophy, of thought, reasoning, and logic. And I didn't know that there was a difference between all three. There is. You'll learn if you haven't taken the class. I also learned protection methods for being a young professional out in the workforce. How do I talk to my peers when they're talking about, do God really exist? How do I talk to my child who's growing up and maybe one day he'll ask me, like, how does it make sense for someone to exist that I've never seen or heard? But when I was taking this class, I was told that you shouldn't take this class to argue, equip yourself with arguments so you can argue against an atheistic mindset. But what it really did for me is it solidified my faith about the existence of God. And I'm going to be really embarrassed to say this, but I actually thought I didn't need the class at first. I thought, God and philosophy is not really my cup of joe. I'm pretty good at my faith. And really, the one who has no knowledge will really say they have enough knowledge. And that was proven so true from the first moment, not even the first full day, the first moment of the class. And I struggled with the philosophy class a lot because my background is in science and policy. It's not in philosophy. I've never taken a philosophy class, even as an elective in college. So that part of my brain I did not know existed. It just did not work. So the whole year I struggled to learn. It just felt like every week my brain just did a 10-mile run. And it was difficult. I wouldn't say this class is for the faint of heart because the topic is difficult. It's a difficult topic, but Imam Azeez does a wonderful job of making it easy to understand. And like Imam Kamran said, he is patient with his student and he will put up with all your intellectual and unintellectual questions. And the other thing I wanted to say was, one of the reasons I took the class was because I wanted to be a student. I don't know what more of an honor is to be a student of Imam Azeez in this community. And I don't need to go into more detail about what a great teacher Imam Azeez is, because Imam Kamran did that for me. The other reason why I would say that this class is different than either the video series or the book that you're reading, why I would recommend the class is because you have that classroom environment. You have a whole year with Imam Azeez to talk and learn about this in detail. And then you're also going through the struggles with your peers, crying over all this terminology and understanding, and this doesn't make sense. What is infinity and how does that make sense? And how does the evolution make sense? How does the moral argument make sense? You are going through all of that with peers, with Imam Azeez. And it's really a wonderful feeling. And I would say I would even benefit going out again to a second time, because then it would really settle, I guess. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
I started thinking about all the unintellectual questions I've asked. Thank you so much, Sister Monia. As Sister Monia and some of us have mentioned, the third kind of leg of this content and this project is the Age of Atheism video series. So I'm sure some of you have probably heard about it. We filmed it and published it last year, and it's a 10-episode series in sort of like a conversational podcast style between Imam Azeez and Imam Kamran. So we wanted to take this opportunity, for those of you who are not familiar with it, to just go ahead and air a 5-minute segment, and I'll get that going for you in just a minute. But I wanted to speak just for myself. I was involved in the project and sort of put together the logistics. And you guys know when you're doing spiritual work, and it's one of those projects where things just fall into place. Maybe you did something right, maybe you didn't, but it just fell into place, and it was easy, and the best vendors came up, and the easiest, logistics played out, and Imam Azeez and Imam Kamran didn't have to refilm even one episode. They just did it, and we filmed it, and it was done, and it was high quality. This was that type of project. We secluded ourselves for 4 days at a community member's home that they so graciously offered us, and I think the entire team that was there will speak to, you could feel the spirituality in the air. It was absolutely incredible. So if you haven't had a chance to watch this series, I personally highly recommend it. And like I said, give us 30 seconds here and we'll get it started. We'll show you a 5-minute preview of the first episode.
I'm super excited. I'm super grateful today. We're doing something that we've talked about many, many times for many, many years. Having conversations, especially for myself, the opportunity to learn from you. And at the end of many of those conversations, I say to myself, I wish we had recorded that.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it'll be like in a car. But be like, can someone please put a phone or a camera on the dashboard or something to record this, or maybe like we're having dinner. It's an amazing journey.
I mean, the conversations have gone far and wide, addressed many different topics. But today, and for the next few conversations for the series, I think we want to focus, right? We want to talk about arguments, specifically the most powerful arguments in support of the concept of God. And we want to talk about the arguments that are often cited, the most popular arguments against the concept of God. And inshallah, we're going to get into all of that, but I want to start actually with something that you recently completed, the book that you just recently wrote, The Imam and the Atheist.
Yeah, that's the name of my book, alhamdulillah.
I mean, Imam scholars that they'll write, it'll be on fiqh, it'll be on other topics. You chose to write on this particular topic, the topic of atheism, the challenge of faith in the modern world. Why did you write this book?
You've been a part of that journey yourself, and I've served as an imam now for about 15 years, maybe a little bit longer. And the more you work with people, the more you work with the community, I guess the more you realize what people actually need at the end of the day. And while providing space for people to pray and get closer to God, maybe it's looked at as the primary function of the masjid. You actually do realize that as you dig a little bit deeper, when you work with people, that their needs may go far beyond that. And the journey has taught me that there's a faith crisis in the community. There's a faith crisis in the world, and I had to address that. And in fact, like a couple of years ago, I think is what launched me on this journey. Was a lady that came to me, and all these counseling sessions that we have, some are more pleasant than others, right. And some counseling sessions leave you with a heavy heart that you struggle actually for a week afterwards. You try to be engaged with community members as they come, but you also try to be slightly distanced, because if you're too engaged, then it makes your day miserable.
Right.
And if you're too distanced, and then you appear to be callous and insensitive. Yeah. So it's always very difficult to walk this fine line, but I think that was one of those moments when I found myself completely sucked into the situation, because this lady basically told me that her son, who used to come to Sunday school, memorize the Quran, was such a righteous kid, in her words, hamamat al-masjid, the pigeon of the masjid, literally flying around, doing.
You see these kids today, right?
Absolutely.
Fly around the masjid.
Running around, having fun, just involved in all the programs. The kind of kid that you would imagine, would never fall off the path. And she told me that my son became a trans person, transgender, and became an atheist and completely lost his faith. And the lady was basically just sobbing the whole time. And the last thing that she said, which really frightened me and totally shocked me, and I don't know why I still remember that particular sentence, she said, "I lost my son to the wolves." The wolves. I lost my son to the wolves. And that continued to resonate with me ever since. And I kept asking myself, what can I do? Number one, to help this lady and her son, but also to help other kids in the community, that may be struggling with faith.
So, as I mentioned earlier, to watch the rest of the series and the rest of this particular episode, you can visit our YouTube channel. There's also a QR code by the front door that you can scan. So the moment we've all been waiting for, I'd like to introduce the VIA Institute's co-founder, senior imam, and the author of The Imam and Atheist, Imam Azeez.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Oh wow, I didn't know that many people showed up.
I was telling Sister Navera a couple of days ago, she was asking me how many people do you estimate will show up at the event. I told her about 13. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. I begin in the name of Almighty Allah. I invoke His peace and blessings upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I ask Allah to extend His blessings to the Prophet's family, to his companions and their followers, and to the men and women that walk in the footsteps. And I ask Allah to make us among them. Ameen. This event, I think, makes me particularly emotional for so many different reasons. The fact that this has so much to do with my own family and has to do with my own kids. That I have thought that for the longest time it's my responsibility as their father to protect them, right? You protect them from the challenges and the ailments of life, from harms, physical and otherwise. But to feel that this threat has arrived at my own doorstep was really a frightening moment. But I think it also makes me emotional for another reason, and that is, I think of myself as a very small human being, on this tiny little particle in the universe that keeps spinning every single day. I have absolutely no significance whatsoever. At least this is how I see myself, right? The tiny little in marginal speck in the universe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, yet here I am, having to be the one to defend the presence and the existence of God Himself. I can't describe to you how overwhelming that idea has always been to me. Like, who are you to be in that position to defend? God doesn't need you to defend His existence, kind of thing, right? But I wanted to share with you some thoughts, inshallah, tonight. But before that, I wanted to recognize, some really important people that have contributed very directly to the authorship of this particular book. I wanted to thank, the Tarbiyah Board of Trustees and staff. They have been absolutely incredible over the years. Their support, their love, their leadership has allowed me to have maybe a little extra time, to write this book over the years. And by the way, some of you may think that this is such a monumental task, right? And it is. It's been 3 to 4 years in the making. But wallahi, brothers and sisters, I do encourage you, if you have good ideas, if you have original thoughts, put ink to paper right here, right now. And you don't need a 6-month sabbatical. What I did was, it was 5 minutes here, 7 minutes there. I always had my laptop with me. I'd be sitting at my brother's house waiting for dinner. And before my sister-in-law brings the food out, I would write, maybe 1 paragraph. I would be at my doctor's, waiting for my doctor's appointment. I would write 1 paragraph. I would be, at the airport waiting for my flight. I would write a page. This is how you get a book finished. There will never be an opportune time for you to finish an entire book project. So put that in your heads. You realize that it's not as difficult as you think to write it. So it was our board and our staff that has provided me with the opportunity to do this. I also wanted to thank the folks at the Claritas Publishing. I have met them in Istanbul, a few years ago. They are, the owners of Claritas are the same owners of Awakening, by the way. The ones that make the nasheeds and Maher Zain and all that, it's the same 2 brothers that own both companies. And they've become really good friends over the years. Brother Sharif al-Banna and Brother Wasim. Wasim, by the way, is from the Bay Area. They both reside in Istanbul now. Brother Sharif is from London himself, born and raised. And, these brothers have, opened their hearts and opened their careers, to my own ideas. I also wanted to particularly thank Sister Navera, by the way. She's a member of the staff, but, her commitment to this project, over the last, few years has been phenomenal. The video project, by the way, that you just saw is her idea. And she's the one that produced the entire series. And she's the one that conceived of tonight's event as well. You know, she's the one that built the Imam Azeez website, you know, in addition to her administering of the Tarbiyah website. So she's been the one like literally pushing me. You know, you want to do more, you want to get the word out, let more people know. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward her. You know, she's a wife, she's a mother, she has beautiful girls, you know, she's super busy, but you know, what she does for the community is quite astounding. I also wanted to again thank Imam Kamran. He calls himself a student. I never acknowledge that designation. I always say that we're all students of sacred knowledge, and we're all walking the path together. You know, there's no such thing as teacher and student. We're just all helping each other and holding each other's hands. I learned from him, he learned from me. This is what we do all together, right? You may come to Jum'ah think that you're learning from the Imam, but at some point or the other, the Imam realizes that, you know, he is the greatest beneficiary of learning from people and being inspired by an incredible community that has put their trust in him. I wanted to thank the Warith and the Warithat students. These are, you know, the really some of the closest students of knowledge to my heart, and we've worked together for a number of years now. I wanted to particularly thank Sister Masha from Warithat. She's Imam Kamran's wife. She's one of the few people that helped me edit the first copy, the first draft of this book. You know, in our community, I think she is one of very few with an incredible philosophical acumen. And I think that she's going to have an incredible future. Inshallah, she's going to publish a book soon. And remember, mark my words, inshallah, you're going to see her book soon, inshallah. I wanted to thank my GNP students, you know, God and Philosophy, for enduring one full year of classes. How many? I think about 30 sessions, 2 hours each. That is 60 hours of their lives that were spent, you know, on this class. I hope, inshallah ta'ala, that it met your expectations. I wanted to thank the Salam and the Tarbiyah communities. I wanted to thank the Salam community and leadership from so many years ago, because I'm only the person that I am today because of their support, right? Regardless of what happened 9 years ago, you know, I think none of us would have imagined or predicted the future. I do owe so much to the Salam leadership, everyone over there that is still there today, the Salam community that has given me, you know, support to grow and to become, you know, Imam Azeez, whatever that really means. But I also wanted to thank the Tarbiyah community, all of you guys, you know, people that have, you know, given me their support and their du'as, you know, over the years. I don't think that we would have been able to achieve this without an open-minded, strong, supportive community that is ahead of its time. And you guys, mashallah, are 15, 20 years into the future compared to most communities that I have worked with. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. I also wanted to thank my family, you know, particularly my mother. My dad passed away, you know, about 25 years ago. And, you know, he's always been there, being patient with our questions, you know, supporting us, taking care of us. And it was because of his sophistication that I think we learned, you know, how to go deeper into things. But my mom, you know, she was a you know, a school teacher. So you can imagine the type of discipline that she exacted upon us at home, right, every single day. And boy, are we grateful for that. She's here, by the way, if you guys want to honor her. It's difficult to impress your own mother, right? It's very few things you can do that would impress your own mom. Like, she listens to the khutbah, she looks at the book, yeah, it looks nice, it has a nice cover, it's okay. You know? So maybe inshallah when I do my 10th book, she'll appreciate it, finally. You know, I think she was very, very happy to see that, alhamdulillah, you know, my dad passed away when, I think I was 22, you know, my brother was 20, you know, my sister was 15. And, you know, it was not easy, right? For her to be a single mother, you know, at a very young age. She was in her late 30s when my father passed away. It was so difficult for her, so difficult for us. Yet, I guess I could say that, you know, she's done an alright job as a mother, alhamdulillah. And you know, myself, my brother, my sister in Dubai, I think we turned out to be okay. Alhamdulillah. So again, you know, thank you for everything. I wanted to thank my brother Sharif. He's not here tonight, but I think without the role that he played at Tarbiyah, and his leadership and his presence, you know, when he served as executive imam for a couple of years, that really freed me up to be able to do other things, to be able to travel, to be able to read and study. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward him and bless his family. And I also wanted to thank, you know, obviously my kids, Zainab, Adam, and Radwan. Everything that I've done, everything that I have done for Salam or for Tarbiyah was always inspired by my children and the needs of my own kids. Every single program, I've conceived it with my kids in mind. Okay? And so, you know, this book is not an exception to that. So again, please make dua for my kids. I think they've also turned out to be, you know, really good kids, and I'm proud of them. And obviously that would have not happened without, them having an incredible mother. So my wife Kauthar, she's right over there as well. And, you know, just her presence, her unconditional love, you know, her support, her patience, her positive attitude always lifted us up. You know, in the most difficult of times, it's not easy to be married to, you know, someone that does what I do, right? It's very, very difficult. Yet, with grace, with a beautiful smile, she put up with it without complaints, you know, over the years. And, you know, here we are, right? Growing great together. I told you it was going to be an emotional night, so you've been forewarned. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran to the believers, قُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ وَأَهْلِيكُمْ نَارًا. Right? Protect your families, yourselves, and your families from the fire. Okay? If you ask any parent, their primary job is to not put clothes on their backs and food in their bellies, but to protect them from the fire in the afterlife. To protect them from the punishment and the wrath of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's my main job. Okay? And so everything I do as a parent is inspired by that drive, is inspired by that motive. And in the hadith, you know, Rasulullah says, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, that a day will come when holding on to your faith is going to be, you know, just as difficult as holding on to a piece of charcoal in your hand, like a flame of fire in your own hands. And when I was a kid, I used to you know, listen to this stuff from the Shaykh al-Ramash. I was like, how is that even possible? Like, you know, when will it ever be the case that holding on to your faith is as difficult as holding on to a piece of flame? And I think that you and I know all too well today that has become the case, right? And it's not just for the people of Palestine or people who live in war-torn countries or struggling. I think it's for us here, right? You know, surrounded by all this dunya, surrounded by all this materialism, surrounded by our busy lifestyles, you know, our smartphones and our social media, surrounded by the bad influence of popular culture, and definitely surrounded by atheistic ideas. If not atheism itself, but atheistic ideas. Ideas that don't take into consideration the presence of God at all. People who resolve relationship issues and problems without mentioning God. People who talk about economic stability without mentioning God. People who talk about, you know, developing career paths for themselves without mentioning God. They deal with their own challenges without bringing God into the equation. So even if atheism is not so, you know, in your face, which it has become, right? The subtle atheistic culture, or I should call it the subtle atheistic subculture that has now permeated everything and has now infused everything. That is what we deal with, and so the grip is gradually loosening, right? And the deen gradually, you know, slips away from our hands like mercury. And so, you know, the whole statement that was made in the video when the lady said, I lost my son to the wolves, wallahi, I still think of it to this day. Scares me so much. You know, what is a parent's worst fear? Is to be, you know, at a department store and your tiny little kid disappeared, right? Now, what is worse than that is for your kid to be snatched by the wolves and eaten alive, okay? Which I really think that is what happens today when people who are kind and loving, who were peaceful, people who, found perspective and meaning in life, people who, whatever it is, how difficult their day was, they throw their prayer rug and they make some dua and suddenly just all the pain vaporizes, right? People who found value in listening to the Quran, found spirituality in Taraweeh. They would go to Umrah, once every couple of years in order to for all the struggles to dissipate. Imagine taking that away from a human being. And you're left just you and the elements. A harsh abyss of an unforgiving reality. And your head is bashed against those rocks every single day, unabashedly, unstoppable for the rest of your life. Imagine that this is how you live. And then after that, so you're literally on the brink of suicide for your entire existence, asking yourself every single day, is it worth living or not? Do I need to kill myself or not? Okay? And if you're brave enough to wait until the very end for you to die naturally, you know in your heart that you go into the abyss, no mention of you whatsoever, you get mixed up back with the earth, nothing, zero exists afterwards. Imagine how tough that existence is. Okay? This book project, or all the work that we do, it's not just about saving the deen or protecting Islam or defending God. It's about people. It's about human beings. This project for me was about compassion. I don't want the light of God to be extinguished in someone's heart, because what is left is cobweb. What is left is pain, is abandonment. What is left is someone who's just counting the day to die. Right? That is what is left in a human being without Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Without God, there is nothing to live for. There is no meaning, there is no purpose, there is no direction, there is no morality, there is no right or wrong, right? There is absolutely no meaning to life whatsoever. That is what I wanted to, that's what I wanted to defend. That's what I wanted to work with. In Muslim countries, Muslims in general don't have that many challenges. Perhaps this is changing now with social media, but just growing up in a Muslim country myself, up until I was, I graduated high school, all we did at the masjid was what? Right? All we did was just study, fiqh and hadith and Quran. I would do my hifd with my shaykh, we'd do a little bit of tazkiyah, we'd do like some tahajjud together once a week, qiyam, all these religious practices. But my faith was never put to the test. It was never challenged. You grow up in a Muslim society, no one challenges you. Okay? And so you take one of these people, you put them in a society like ours, and they are surrounded by all these ideas from every direction, because their immune system is so weak. What's going to happen to them? Their faith is crushed. Some of those kids, I've seen them, wallah, a lot of Iraqis, a lot of Syrians, a lot of Egyptians, a lot of Pakistanis. They're new immigrants, young people who come and they go to college. The Atheist club has a little table, and they have like some flyers and stuff like that. They grab a flyer. Why would a loving God kill children? And then suddenly you're reading this, oh shoot, I've never thought of that before, right? All it takes is 2 weeks for you to be a beautiful, juicy meal for the wolves. That's all it takes, okay? Now, in a non-Muslim society like ours, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to fortify the faith of our Muslim community, first and foremost. I'm not interested in debating atheists. I want to work with my own people. I want them to pray their 5 and to actually enjoy it, and for the mind not to be restless. Oh my God, does God exist? Am I wasting my time? Is this really worth it? If you remove the restlessness from the mind, then the heart enjoys the relationship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and enjoys your devotional practices. So in many ways, what I'm trying to say is that the more we do this in our non-Muslim society, we will produce Muslims that are stronger in their faith than those who grew up in Muslim majority countries. Surrounded by Islam in every direction and from every possible way. Isn't that true? If we do this right, we will have stronger Muslims in their faith here that are able to take on the challenges of the world. Let me share with you some stats. 35 of Generation Z identifies as, not trans. 35 of Generation Z identifies as unaffiliated. And unaffiliated, just a fancy word for what? For atheist, right? 1 in 5 people who belong to Generation Z, these are published statistics, don't take my word for it, go online and check for yourself. 1 out of 5 from Generation Z identify as LGBTQ, right? And again, in my personal experience working with young people, once you've lost certainty about your own sexuality, that is a slippery slope that ultimately leads to what? It leads to atheism, right? In 90% of the cases that I have seen, all right? There is about 500 million people. There's 7 billion human beings. There is about 500 million people worldwide that identify as atheists. These are very, very scary numbers. Now, let me share with you some facts that are very, very essential. In all the American Muslim community, you know how many of us identify as converts to Islam? About 24%. These are Pew statistics. 24%, that's about 1/4 of our Muslim community in America identifies as converts. God bless them. I'm proud of them. Okay? Now, what is the percentage of adult Muslims that were raised in a Muslim household that lose their faith and become atheists? 23%. 23%. Okay, I take that back. They don't become atheists. They just leave Islam. Alright, they leave Islam. Some of them become Christian. Some of them follow other religions. But about half of them, which is like a little over half, 13% actually become atheists. So we gain 24% every year, but we lose about the same number, people who either become Christian or they become atheists. I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm just trying to show you that this is pretty serious. And if you have kids, and if you're raising kids, or you plan to raise kids in this country, imagine that your child has a 25% chance of losing their faith. And that you as a parent, there's a 25% chance that you're going to be standing, inshallah ta'ala, by the gates of Jannah, and you look for your kids and you don't find them. Imagine how painful that could potentially become. Alright? Now, what are some of the things that we can do? And I will end with this, very short list. Maybe I'll just talk very briefly about the book itself. Some of the things that we can do. Number 1, mentorship. I have been sounding like a broken record for so many years. Mentorship, mentorship, mentorship. Humanity have always had mentors. Throughout history, Muslims always had mentors. They had shuyukh, they had teachers, they had people, they had elders that they worked with on a regular basis. They would go and touch base, at least once a week, sit with them for about an hour on religious matters and everything else. Our generation is almost the only generation in our Islamic history where people just operate on their own. They don't talk to their parents, they talk to their peers. Or they go online, which is significantly worse. Alright? And so, mentorship. If you as an adult, you're not attending a halaqah at least once a month, you're really doing yourself a tremendous disservice. Alright? If you have a child, even an adult child, and that child is not in a halaqah, some type of a mentorship program where they're meeting a person of knowledge on a regular basis, you're really doing them a huge disservice. You're exposing them to the wolves. The wolves are catching their smell. The wolves are catching their smell. What does Rasulullah say in the hadith? Right? الشيطان من الواحد أقرب وهو من الاثنين أبعد. Shaitan is closer to the individual and farther away from two people together. And the larger the number, the farther away shaitan becomes. وَإِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُ الذِّئْبُ مِنَ الْغَنَمِ الْقَاصِيَةِ. Going back to the wolves, wolves only eat the stray sheep. A sheep that is in the flock with its mentors and its halaqas and its community becomes a lot more immune. But a sheep that is by itself out there in the world, trust me, will get served to the wolves. Number 2, we need to teach our kids aqidah, the Islamic creed. Ask yourself as a parent, when was the last time you talked about the concept of God, the names of God, the attributes of God? Why do you think God exists? The causal logic of God, the design argument for God, the moral existence of God. If you've never, some of you will say, well, I don't even know these things myself. And if you don't, then you're certainly incapable of teaching that to your own children, right? And that is a very precarious state of affairs. All we do with the kids at the masjid, teach them the Quran, teach them hadith, how to pray, how to make wudu, how to make this dua before you enter the bathroom, right? And the parents are so happy. My son came home today, he knows the dua, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-khubuthi wal-khaba'ith. The dua of entering the bathroom. Okay. In 2 years, your son is going to be in high school, and he's going to start working with the atheists. That dua will become a moot point. The dua will become such a marginal point, because the heart does not have God anymore. Right? So we have to teach our kids aqidah. Okay? And part of it is to also teach them the arguments for God, refutations to the arguments against God. Okay? And the whole shebang, which is what I kind of did in the book, but also more extensively I did in the class. Encourage open conversations about faith and about doubt at home. We have to encourage that and not say astaghfirullah, not say what's wrong with you. I'm not saying you should accept it on faith, right? And not use ourselves as examples. I grew up in a Muslim country. I never asked my parents these questions, implying that your son or your daughter are not supposed to ask these questions to you. To the contrary, I say create a culture at home where talking about faith is encouraged. And your kids coming to you, Dad, I have a bit of doubt in my heart. I heard this today at school. I read this hadith that didn't sit well with me. How could Rasulullah say something like this? You want to encourage that, and you want to air it out, and you want to talk about it. Hey, son, or you talk to your daughter. Listen, honey, I may not have the answer to your question, but you know what? We're both seekers of the truth. We're going to go talk to the Imam about it. All right? That is the process. All right? And wallahi, brothers and sisters, and I'm not saying this, out of just hollow pride. Wallahi, brothers and sisters, there isn't a single argument against God that hasn't already been addressed thoroughly. Thoroughly. You may not know every answer, but there are those who do. Atheism out there is just a facade. It's an industry. It is replacing one metaphysics with another. In one metaphysics, you believe in the existence of a creator of the universe. In another metaphysics, you don't believe in the existence of that creator. It's just another faith. Atheism is replacing faith with faith. And you have to understand that. Alright? So, encourage this culture at home. Number 4, take my advice, spend less time on social media. Spend less time on Instagram, spend less time on Facebook, spend less time on TikTok, spend less time on, whatever it is that people do these days. Spend less time on social media. Even Twitter. Some Muslims today, mashallah, they think that Twitter is their salvation. Alright? Elon Musk is the prophet of our times. You're absolutely wrong, and you are really deceiving yourselves. You are healthier as a human being, and definitely as a Muslim, if you stay away from social media in general. Go onto social media occasionally and be very, very directed and very, very intentional in what you're doing. I need to check this out. I need to make an announcement for the masjid. I need to look at this. Be very intentional and stop the perpetual scrolling culture that is really destroying our time and destroying our hearts. All right? Last but not least, do a lot of dua and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our faith in these difficult times. Rasulullah said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, in his dua, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-kufri wal-faqr. The messenger, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, used to ask Allah for protection from kufr. Lord, protect my heart from kufr. Protect my heart from disbelieving in you. Protect my heart from losing my faith. So every single day, make dua for yourself, make dua for your children, make it a habit every sajda, to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect your faith. A couple of comments on the book. The book is designed to address all the arguments for God that have been known for centuries, right? And it uses this, sort of dramatic dialogue between the imam, not particularly me, but, a fictional imam in a fictional community that talks to a fictional member of that community whose nephew lost his faith. And so the uncle is very upset. And he ostracized his own nephew, and he's so angry at his own nephew, so he comes to the Imam venting, and through the conversations with the Imam fortifies the man's faith and shows him how little he knows, and shows him that, actually his nephew almost had every reason to lose faith, and he goes back and he talks to his nephew in order to bring him to the faith. The very last chapter, there's a bit of a twist, and if you've read the book from the beginning to end, you'll know what that twist is. I put a tiny little artifact, a tiny little motif in the book, and if you're able to identify it, please come talk to me. You'll have a gift, inshallah, from me. And so that twist ends with the Imam at his house, and this nephew actually requests to have a meeting with the Imam. So they come to the Imam at his house after Fajr, and they drink coffee, and they talk about God and purpose and meaning and existence and so forth. I'm not the best author. English is my second language. These concepts, although I studied philosophy extensively at school, both undergrad and graduate school, but I'm not a philosophy major. And so there is definitely flaws in this project. And I'm hoping, inshallah ta'ala, that this is a springboard of some more work to be done in the future, perhaps by me, but hopefully by others as well. For us to acknowledge that, if America has any hope today for faith to be restored, that hope does not reside, in Christian and Jewish circles. It resides in us. The Muslim community is the last men and women standing in the world when it comes to faith. And it's up to us, inshallah ta'ala, to help this wider society restore faith. And if people who are atheists, you help them restore faith, I promise you, they're not going to go back to Judaism and Christianity. They're going to all become Muslim. And I pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that in the next 50 years, with sincerity, with strong effort, that we see Americans converting to Islam en masse. I will leave it there, inshallah ta'ala. I don't know if Sister Nadira has something else to share. So we pray Isha and then do Q&A, or?
Oh, actually, I'm sorry, Q&A.
Q&A first. Yeah, Q&A first. So the microphone is going to be floating around, and I'll be more than happy to take your questions. If you've, I'm not trying to promote the book. This is not a book promotion event, by the way. All the proceeds from this book are being donated to Tarbiyah anyway, right? So literally, financially, it's even ridiculous to think about it. So maybe future editions. When it becomes a New York Times bestseller, that's when inshallah, I'll have my retirement plan. But, for now, this is not a promotion of the book. I just want you to know that it exists. And if you know someone that may have an issue with faith, at least this is an additional resource, inshallah, for you to use at your discretion.
So any questions and answers? We have a mic here. And then inshallah we'll move on to Isha and the blessing.
Imam Azeez, while writing this book, how did you manage to balance life?
Like I said, it took me about a year and a half to actually finish writing it, the first draft. And, writing a book is a really painstaking process, and it's excruciating, and it really takes a lot of time, okay? But publishing it takes even more time. Finding a publisher, working with the publisher on reviews, multiple drafts, going back and forth, Brother Sharif al-Banna, from Claritas, he's a scholar, I think, in his own right, and he has an interest in helping young Muslims publish. And so I think that Claritas does not make any money, by the way. I think they printed 5,000 copies, and they put, I think, 2,500 copies on Amazon, and they keep 2,500 copies for their website. I think we ran out of we sold out the Amazon copies, so they ended up supplying Amazon with another 2,500 copies. And inshallah, if all 5,000 copies are sold, they're going to contact me and ask me to, write a preface for the second edition. And I plan, inshallah, to add, a few chapters to it as well. But the point is, it's 5, 10, 15 minutes every single day. That's how I managed. And many people don't know this, already, but alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, using that methodology, I already submitted the final draft of my second book project to Claritas about 2 months ago. And they told me, alhamdulillah, that that book will be published around the Ramadan time of next year. I'm not going to tell you what it's about yet, inshallah, when it comes out. And now, I'm actually almost 2/3 done with the third book project. All right? And so, when you start doing it and it actually works, you're like, wait a second, I think I can do this. All right? 5 minutes a day, I can handle that. And pace yourself out over a year and a half, you'll be able to finish. So this is how I did it. I don't think it affected my family. It did not affect my work. It was just very little impact every day because it was just such a short period of time. Now there's a hand back here.
So of course, the atheism now is one of the challenges. What I see, especially for young people now, also another scenario where they don't deny the existence of God, but they try to compare between different religions.
Mm-hmm.
Is the discussion the same, or the rationale to defend the existence of God is the same about comparing religion to each other?
No, they're two different processes. I actually plan, inshallah ta'ala, in the future to write a book that would basically revolve around one theme, which is to make a case for Islam. Okay? I need more time to work on this. However, there's a chapter in this book where I indirectly made a case for Islam towards the very end of the book, when I talk about the diversity of religious paths and how we choose kind of thing. So this is addressed here. But obviously making a case for God and making a case for Islam are not one and the same, but they're definitely flip sides of the same coin, if you ask me. There was a question back here.
Assalamu alaikum, Imam. Jazakallah again for everything. Inshallah, we're going to start a family book club. I have an unintellectual question. I was just curious why you chose the relationship between like an uncle and a nephew versus like just a parent and a child, or if there was any specific reason.
I felt that a parent and a child was too intimate for the conversations that I wanted to have in the book, because there's a lot of emotion. When a parent works with their own kids, there's always a lot of emotions, and sometimes the emotions overwhelm a conversation that needs to be rational or intellectual. Okay? And if the person was a complete stranger, I felt like maybe the imam is not going to have enough empathy to work with that person. So making it a member of the community that knows the imam very well, and his nephew, not his son or daughter, but his nephew lost their faith, just seemed like a better platform, springboard for what I wanted to achieve with the book. It's not an unintellectual question at all. Sister Sumaya, by the way, was one of my brightest students at the Garden Philosophy class. So, inshallah, in the future, she'll be qualified to teach the class herself. So she's very intellectual. She's just super humble.
Is it on?
Yes. Jazakallah khair, Imam. I have a question. So, do you encourage youth to directly read the book, or we get the idea and react to them?
I actually don't mind. I don't mind anyone reading it. You live in an age where you can't tell someone, don't read this and don't read that. I do, however, feel that it'll have a stronger impact if it's read by teachers and parents and mentors and imams that work with their communities, and then they would take these ideas and kind of process them in a manner that better suits their own realities. But I think even if young people, especially like high school and up, if they are intellectually oriented and they're able to process what I think is sometimes complex concepts in the book, I think they'll still benefit from it, inshallah, as well. Yes?
Assalamu alaikum.
I wanted to ask a question. Say in a family, they really haven't talked about like the reasons for existence of God or atheistic ideas, really. But you know, they've talked about Islam and everything like that, and we have like preteen kids. How would you recommend bringing up this topic? You know, I imagine you don't want to be like, there's people who don't believe in God. Are you one of them? You know, nothing like that. So how would you recommend bringing this up into like maybe bite-sized pieces or in a way where they don't feel like they're being lectured, and you know, connecting with them? And
That's a great question. This is a really insightful question. So our kids are exposed. Let me just, lead with this. Our kids are exposed. I think, Zainab, the first time she talked to me about someone who challenged the concept of God, she was in elementary school. And she, kids who are raised by parents who are atheists are told God doesn't exist. All right, so they go to school telling other kids God doesn't exist. So I remember we were having dinner at Chili's in El Dorado Hills. And she was sitting on the table furious, talking to me about her friend, can you believe that she denies the existence of God? So I said, astaghfirullah, that's unbelievable. How did you respond? So she said, I told her, where did we all come from then? So she used the cosmological argument without really knowing what the cosmological argument is. She uses the argument for causality. And I think one of the ways for you to have conversations with the kids about this at home, don't make any assumptions like, oh, my kids, their heart is in the right place. They will never be affected by these things. It's actually those kids that are most vulnerable. All right? So don't make any assumptions about the kids and their spirituality and how religious they are. You want to infuse these conversations as stories. If you're familiar with the Fonts Vitae project out of Kentucky, they have a published book, actually a series of books, that break down these concepts to the children. And it's basically there's this elder that takes the kids and they go out in nature and they have conversations. So he uses the stars and he uses the trees and he uses the mountains in order to weave the 5 or the 6 arguments of God that are mentioned here. And so you're building it in the kid's psyche without explicitly saying there has to be an argument for God in the first place. So just telling stories, I think, is definitely the way to go, depending on the age of those kids.
Any last questions before we pray, Isha?
I don't have a question, I have a comment. Once was said, it takes a village to raise a child. I say it takes a good imam to raise a good community. And on behalf of many, I thank you for what you have done for Salam and Tarbiyah, and I follow with you from Salam to here. And now I'm leaving, so I'm sad, but we'll be in touch.
Any last questions before we pray Isha? Yes. There's a question here.
So, I'm just trying to get your thought process that went into writing this book. Did you have an idea of how you're going to start, how you're going to, the middle page, how you're going to end it? How did you come up with the ideas? And I just want to know the thought process.
So I knew what I wanted to talk about. I knew that I wanted to take all the conversations that I had with my own kids on the dinner table and I want to put them in a book that would benefit other parents. So I knew that I wanted to make a case for God. I choose to live in the universe that is regulated by the Creator Himself. I refuse, not just intellectually, but emotionally and morally, to exist in a reality where God is not there, right? How do I put that in a book? I had a choice. I either put this as prose, make it like, one paragraph after the other, chapter 1, this argument, chapter 2, that argument, and just make it into some kind of an academic enterprise or an academic exercise, rather. And then I remembered, something that I studied when I was in grad school. And when I was in grad school, of course, they have to, all this, liberal arts kids. We were required to, study, the classical works of philosophy, right? So, I have a lot of admiration for Socrates and a lot of respect for Socrates. In fact, some Muslim scholars think that Socrates was a prophet of his people, all right? And so I have a tremendous amount of admiration for his morality, his love for God, and so forth, and also, by extension, his philosophy. And his student, Plato, Socrates died without publishing. So his student Plato wrote the Republic, which is basically bringing all the ideas of Socrates together, but he did it in a dramatic format, where he's having conversations, or his teacher rather, is having conversations with random people in society, lengthy dialogues about justice and God and so forth, and the ideal society. The book is called The Republic. What is the ideal republic? And I borrowed, the Platonic method of weaving Socrates' ideas into this book. I figured the best way is to make it look like a novel, make it look like a dialogue, so that it's easier for people to read. It's more approachable. It looks like a story. There's a tiny bit of a dramatic twist. You're able to follow the progression over time. There's some emotions involved, and also you respond to the refutations as well through the dialogue. Oh, what about this and what about that? So you respond to it, so that just seemed like the most fit. And when I spoke with my publisher, he said, we have nothing like this. So if you write it that way, there will be no competition for this concept. Otherwise, there's a lot that have written it the ordinary way. So that was the background story. Thank you. One last question before we stand up for Aisha? Yes, please.
Do you have any thoughts of translating the book to other languages like Arabic, Urdu, or Spanish?
Imam Kamal promised to translate it to Urdu. I'm kidding. I don't know if his Urdu is that strong, but I did think about it. And I just wanted to, there's a lot of book ideas that I have. I wanted to work on a work of fiction as well. I wanted to really write a work of fiction that would be a representation of my own values in the storytelling arena. And so I think if I sat down and translated this to Arabic, it'll be just almost like you're writing it from scratch. So I'm hoping that my publisher, depending on how successful the book is, that my publisher is going to hire someone to translate it to at least the Arabic language. And then it becomes a success, maybe inshallah they'll move into other languages as well. So it is all in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This work is designed to honor Him, and I'm letting God decide inshallah on the next steps. Jazakallah khair, thank you so much.
Thank you all. We'll pray Isha, and then you'll see this table right here in the corner. That's where Imam will be signing books, inshallah. And we have some snacks for you to enjoy. Thank you.